The human ship arrived at the edge of the Letharian royal fleet without sound. It did not glow like alien vessels, nor did it announce itself with ritual signals or psychic pulses. It simply appeared on the sensors, quiet and solid, like a thought that refused to be ignored. Inside the flagship, Princess Sithala of the Letharian Dominion stood alone in a chamber meant only for the most private moments of her kind. The walls were smooth and pale, grown rather than built, responding softly to her presence. This room was not protected by shields or guards. It was a place of stillness where the mind was laid open. Among her people, this state was called being bare. Not unclothed, but unguarded. No armor, no mental barriers, no political masks. She had not expected to be interrupted. Sithala was preparing herself for a ceremonial address to the High Conclave. The coming hours would decide whether her people would move toward war or continue their slow expansion across the outer systems. The Letharians were old, powerful, and deeply psychic. For centuries, no species had challenged them. Negotiations were rituals of dominance, not discussion. Humans were different. That much was already clear. They were new to the galactic stage and strangely difficult to read. They had no measurable psychic presence. Their ships were crude compared to Letharian designs, yet they moved in ways that suggested stubborn intelligence rather than ignorance. Many in the conclave believed humans should be controlled early, before they grew bold. Sithala was not so certain. As she stood in the chamber, breathing slowly, the room suddenly changed. The walls darkened slightly. A signal passed through the living structure, subtle but urgent. Someone had entered. Her eyes widened. No one should have been able to access this chamber. The doors required psychic authentication, something humans could not produce. Yet footsteps echoed softly behind her. She turned. The being standing there was human. He froze the moment he saw her. He was tall but not imposing by Letharian standards. His posture was stiff, his eyes wide with the clear expression of shock. He wore the dark uniform of a diplomatic envoy, though it looked plain compared to the ceremonial armor worn by most species. He had no weapon in his hands, no visible implants. No psychic field surrounded him. For several seconds, neither moved. Sithala felt exposed in a way she never had before. Not because of physical vulnerability, but because her mind was open, unshielded, and this human stood within arm's reach. If he were hostile, she would have little defense. But the human looked just as startled. He began, then stopped. He swallowed and lowered his gaze slightly, a gesture she later learned was human respect rather than submission. "I'm sorry. This room wasn't marked on the map. I thought it was a transit corridor." Her heart beat faster, not from fear alone, but confusion. No alien would enter such a space without intention. No Letharian would dare. "You are not permitted here," she said carefully, her voice calm despite the tension tightening her thoughts. "I know that now," the human replied quickly. "I'll leave immediately." He took a step backward. The room reacted before she could stop it. The chamber sealed itself, responding to the sudden emotional spike in Sithala's unguarded mind. The exit faded, smooth walls replacing the doorway. The human's head snapped up. "That's not ideal." Sithala stared at the sealed wall. "This was bad, very bad. You cannot leave until the chamber releases you," she said, "and it will not do so until my mental state stabilizes." The human exhaled slowly. "Of course, that makes sense. Alien ship, psychic architecture." "My mistake." Despite herself, Sithala felt a strange pull of curiosity. He was afraid but not panicking. He did not demand, he did not threaten, he did not even ask her to open the door. "What is your designation?" she asked. "Daniel Reyes," he said. "Human diplomatic observer, assigned to your fleet for preliminary talks." Observer, not ambassador. That alone spoke volumes of how the galaxy viewed humans. Sithala studied him more closely. His mind was silent, not shielded, simply absent of psychic signal. It was like staring into deep space where a star should be, unsettling but oddly calming. "You have violated one of our most sacred boundaries," she said, his shoulders tightened. "I understand. I'm prepared to accept responsibility." That answer struck her harder than any excuse would have. Letharian law was absolute. Violations were met with force or domination. Submission was expected, but only after resistance. This human offered responsibility immediately, without bargaining. Outside the chamber, alarms began to sound. Guards would come. Psychics. Commanders. The incident would be reported to the conclave within minutes, and the story would spread. A human had entered the princess's private chamber while she was bare. In Letharian culture, the implications were severe. Daniel stood still as voices echoed faintly through the walls. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, though he did not fully understand it. He only knew he had made a terrible mistake. "I didn't mean to disrespect you," he said quietly, "or your people." Sithala believed him. That realization frightened her more than his presence. The chamber began to respond again, light shifting as her thoughts calmed. The exit slowly reformed. Before it fully opened, she spoke. "When you leave this room," she said, "others will decide your fate. They will assume intent where there was none." He nodded. "That's usually how it goes. You may be detained, punished, used as an example." "I figured as much." She hesitated. No Letharian would say what she said next. "You should know," she continued, "that among my people to stand bare is to invite truth. No deception can survive here." Daniel met her eyes again. "Then I'm glad this was an accident. I don't think I'm very good at lying anyway." The door opened fully. Guards flooded the corridor outside, weapons and psychic pressure ready. They froze when they saw the princess standing unharmed, composed, and the human stepping out with his hands visible. Sithala raised a hand. The guards paused. "This human entered without intent," she said. "He will be escorted, not restrained." The guards hesitated, clearly shocked, but obeyed. As Daniel was led away, he glanced back once. Not with triumph, not with fear, but with something like quiet concern. Sithala watched him go, her thoughts racing. The galaxy believed humans were weak because they lacked psychic power. They believed them crude, unrefined, and easy to shape. Yet one human, by accident alone, had entered a place no conqueror ever had. And instead of exploiting her vulnerability, he had offered respect. For the first time, Sithala wondered if the galaxy had made a terrible mistake in underestimating a species that could stand unshielded before the unknown and still choose restraint. Far away in the silent depths of space, unseen systems shifted. This was only the beginning. The news spread through the Letharian fleet faster than any official report. Whispers moved along psychic channels, twisting and growing as they passed from mind to mind. A human had entered the princess's private chamber while she was bare. Some believed it was an act of bold dominance. Others thought it was a test, a deliberate insult. Very few believed it was an accident. Daniel Reyes was taken to a holding chamber near the center of the flagship. It was not a prison in the human sense. The walls were smooth and warm, the air carefully balanced for his biology. There were no bars, no restraints, but the psychic pressure was impossible to ignore. He could feel it like heavy weather pressing against his thoughts, even though it could not truly touch his mind. Two Letharian guards stood outside the chamber, tall and still, their glowing eyes unfocused as they listened to distant commands through their shared mental network. Daniel sat on the edge of a low platform and let out a slow breath. He had trained for first contact. He had studied alien cultures, laws, and customs. None of that training had prepared him for accidentally walking into the most sacred private space of an alien royal. He replayed the moment again and again in his head, searching for some sign he had missed. The map had shown a corridor. The door had opened without resistance. He had assumed human technology interference or a translation error. He had been wrong. Now the consequences were coming. Elsewhere on the ship, Princess Sithala stood before a gathering of high-ranking officials. The room was wide and filled with soft light, its walls alive with shifting patterns that reflected the emotional state of those inside. The tension was thick and sharp. "They cannot be trusted," one of the elders said, his voice echoing both aloud and within the shared psychic field. "No species without psychic presence should have been able to enter that chamber. This was an intrusion." "A challenge," another added, "or a test of dominance." Sithala listened in silence. She felt their certainty pressing against her, urging her to align with it. Normally, she would. The unity of thought was comforting, powerful. But her memory of the humans stood in sharp contrast to their conclusions. "He did not know," she said finally. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. "There was no intent." Several minds pushed back at once. "Intent is irrelevant," an elder replied. "The act itself carries meaning." "Among us," Sithala agreed, "not necessarily among humans." That caused a ripple of discomfort. The idea that another species might operate on principles so different that such an act could be meaningless was deeply unsettling. "The Conclave will demand punishment," a commander said. "If we show weakness now, other species will see it." Sithala turned her gaze toward him. Is restraint weakness? The question hung in the air. Far from the council chamber, the human fleet waited. They had detected the psychic disturbance almost immediately. Human sensors could not read thoughts, but they could measure energy shifts, power fluctuations, and unusual activity. The sudden increase in Letharian internal signals had triggered alarms. Admiral Helen Carter stood on the bridge of the human flagship, her arms crossed as she stared at the tactical display. Her face was hard, but her eyes showed concern. "They've isolated rays," an officer reported. "No physical harm detected so far." "So far," Carter repeated. "Any communication?" "None. They're not responding to standard diplomatic channels." Carter nodded slowly. "Prepare a non-aggressive broadcast, full transparency. Let them know we are aware of the situation and willing to cooperate." The officer hesitated. "Ma'am, what if they interpret that as pressure?" "Then we'll adjust," Carter said. "But we don't abandon our people, not ever." Back in the holding chamber, Daniel felt a subtle change in the air. The psychic pressure shifted, becoming less heavy, more focused. Someone was approaching. The door opened smoothly and Princess Sithala entered alone. Daniel stood immediately, his hands visible. "Your Highness." "You do not need to rise," she said. "You are not on trial, not yet." He relaxed slightly but remained standing. "I understand whatever happens next won't be pleasant." Her eyes studied him closely. Again, she felt that strange absence where his mind should have been. It was still unsettling, but now it also felt honest. "Why did you submit so quickly?" she asked. "You did not argue. You did not demand protection from your fleet." He frowned slightly, considering the question. "Because I was wrong. Where I come from, if you break someone's rules by accident, you still take responsibility, especially if they matter to you." That answer sent a quiet shock through her thoughts. "And if the punishment is severe?" "Then it's still mine to face," he said. "But my people will want to talk before anything final happens." She nodded. "They already do." Sithala walked slowly around the chamber. "You must understand what this incident represents to my people. To be bare is to be seen completely. No defense, no secrets." "I didn't see you that way," Daniel said quickly. "I mean, I saw you as a person who deserved privacy. I looked away as soon as I realized." That memory returned to her with sharp clarity. He had turned his gaze aside. A small action, meaningless by Letharian standards, but deeply symbolic in hindsight. "You are difficult to interpret," she said. He gave a small, uneasy smile. "We get that a lot." She stopped in front of him. "There are those who believe your species is dangerous because it cannot be controlled through psychic means." "Control isn't something we respond well to," Daniel said. "But cooperation, that's different." The words echoed in her mind long after he spoke them. A sudden surge of psychic noise rippled through the ship. Sithala stiffened. Something was wrong. Images flooded the shared network, confusion, alarm, pain. The ship's psychic systems were being strained, pushed beyond safe limits. "What is happening?" Daniel asked, sensing the shift even without understanding it. "There is interference," she said, her focus turning inward. "Not from you." She reached out, probing the source. What she found made her blood run cold. A hidden signal buried deep within the fleet's psychic infrastructure was amplifying emotional responses, driving aggression and fear. It was subtle, clever, and old, too old. "This is not human technology," she whispered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Someone's trying to push you toward war." "Yes," she said slowly, "and they have been doing so for a long time." For generations, the Letharian dominion had expanded through quiet dominance. Species submitted willingly under psychic pressure, believing it was natural order. But what if that order had been manipulated? "What can I do?" Daniel asked. Sithala looked at him, really looked at him, a being who could not be touched by psychic influence. A mind that could stand inside their most sacred space without changing it. "You may be the only one who can move freely through this," she said, "without being noticed." He blinked. "You want me to walk through the middle of a psychic storm and poke around alien systems I don't understand?" "Yes," he exhaled, then nodded. "All right, but if I'm doing this, my people need to know." "They will," she said. "I will speak to them myself." Moments later, a secure channel opened between Sithala and Admiral Carter. The human bridge fell silent as the alien princess appeared on the main display. "This situation is not what it seems," Sithala said. "Your envoy is not a criminal. He may be the key to preventing a conflict that benefits neither of us." Carter studied her carefully. "Then tell me what you need." As Daniel was escorted out of the holding chamber, not as a prisoner, but as a temporary ally, minds across the fleet stirred with confusion and anger. Some saw betrayal, others felt fear, but deep beneath it all, something older and darker reacted. The quiet human had stepped into a game that had shaped the galaxy for centuries. And for the first time, the rules were beginning to break. Daniel moved through the inner corridors of the Letharian flagship with steady steps. The walls around him shimmered with soft light, reacting to the emotional currents flowing through the ship. Where Letharian minds felt pressure and noise, Daniel felt only a strange quiet. He could sense tension in the air, but it did not touch his thoughts. That difference mattered more now than ever. Princess Sithala walked beside him, her expression calm but her focus sharp. Around them, Letharian guards formed a loose perimeter. They were not there to protect Daniel. They were there to watch him, unsure whether he was a solution or a new kind of threat. As they moved deeper, the psychic noise grew stronger. Sithala felt it like a rising storm, emotions bleeding into each other without control. Anger, fear, pride, and suspicion twisted together. This was not natural. A Letharian mind was trained from childhood to maintain balance. "This level of interference should be impossible," she said quietly. "Our systems are designed to prevent this." "Every system has blind spots," Daniel replied, "especially ones built around assumptions." She glanced at him. "Such as?" "That everyone thinks the same way," he said, "or that control always flows from the same source." They reached a chamber hidden beneath layers of living structure. To Letharian senses, it was nearly invisible, masked by familiar psychic patterns. To human instruments, it stood out like a locked door with fresh marks around the edges. "This is it," Sithala said. "The signal origin." The guards hesitated. None of them wanted to enter. The psychic pressure inside was intense, almost painful. Sithala herself felt her thoughts pulling, urging her to step back, to leave it alone. Daniel stepped forward without pause. The moment he crossed the threshold, the pressure dropped, not completely but enough that the guards gasped in surprise. "It doesn't affect him," one of them whispered. Inside the chamber, the air felt heavy but still. Strange structures lined the walls, old and unfamiliar even to Sithala. They were not grown like Letharian technology. They were built layered, precise. "This predates our current designs," she said slowly, "by a great deal." Daniel moved closer to a central console. Symbols flickered across its surface, shifting in patterns meant to be read through psychic interpretation. To Daniel, they were meaningless shapes, but the machine responded to him anyway. "That's not supposed to happen," Sithala said, her voice tight. "Maybe it's reacting to absence," Daniel said. "If it's designed to interact with minds, a blank might confuse it." As if in response, the machine pulsed. The psychic noise across the ship spiked, then faltered. Sithala staggered slightly, steadying herself against the wall. In that brief disruption, she felt something she had never sensed before. A presence, not Letharian, not human, old, vast, and deeply patient. "This system was not meant to serve us," she said, horror creeping into her thoughts. "It was meant to guide us." "To push you," Daniel said, "slowly, over generations." Images began to surface in Sithala's mind, unfiltered by the usual safeguards, ancient decisions. Wars justified by necessity, species subdued for their own good. Each step logical on its own, all guided by subtle emotional pressure. The Dominion's rise had not been entirely its own. Outside the chamber, alarms sounded again. This time they were different, sharper. More urgent, on the human flagship, Admiral Carter watched as the Letharian fleet shifted formation. Energy levels spiked. Weapons came online, not aimed at the humans, but not relaxed either. "They're on edge," an officer said. "Something's pushing them." "Rays?" Carter asked. "No signal yet." Inside the hidden chamber, the ancient system reacted to Daniel's presence more violently. The structures began to glow, psychic energy surging outward in an attempt to reassert control. Sithala dropped to one knee, gasping. The pressure was overwhelming. Daniel moved between her and the core, placing himself directly in the path of the surge. Nothing happened to him. The energy flowed around him like water around a stone. The machine faltered again. "You can't control what you can't touch," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "And you can't touch me." He reached out, not with his mind, but with his hands, and placed them on the console. Human technology and Letharian systems had never been designed to interact like this. But that was the point. The ancient device, built to guide psychic species, had no defense against something that operated entirely outside its rules. The patterns on the console destabilized. The psychic noise across the fleet dropped sharply. Guards outside the chamber straightened, relief and confusion washing through their shared thoughts. "What is he doing?" one asked. "Breaking something," another replied, "or freeing us." Sithala struggled to her feet. With the pressure reduced, she could think clearly again. For the first time in her life, her thoughts felt entirely her own. "This will change everything," she said. "It already has," Daniel replied, "but we're not done." The machine pulsed one last time, then went dark. Across the fleet, Litharian minds reeled as a constant background influence vanished. Some collapsed. Others cried out in shock. Many felt anger, real anger, not guided or shaped. And beneath that anger was fear. For centuries, they had believed their dominance was natural, justified, inevitable. Now they faced the possibility that they had been shaped just as much as the species they ruled. On the bridge of the flagship, Sithala faced her commanders. The psychic field in the room was chaotic, unstable. "We have been influenced," she said plainly. "Our decisions were not entirely our own." Some resisted the idea immediately. Others felt the truth of it deep in their minds. "A human revealed this," one commander said bitterly. "Yes," Sithala replied, "a human who could not be influenced by what controlled us." Silence followed. Elsewhere, older forces stirred. The ancient presence that had guided the Dominion was not alone. Similar systems existed across the galaxy, embedded in the structures of other psychic empires. For the first time, one had been challenged, and it had failed. Daniel stood once more beside Sithala, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "What happens now?" he asked. She looked out at the stars beyond the viewport. "Now we decide who we are without guidance, and whether we face the galaxy honestly." Outside, the Litharian fleet slowly powered down its weapons. The storm had not ended. But for the first time, it was real. The silence after the shutdown of the ancient system was heavier than any alarm. Across the Litharian flagship, minds struggled to adjust. Thoughts that had always flowed along familiar paths now moved without guidance. For many, it felt like standing after a lifetime of leaning on an unseen wall, only to discover it was gone. Princess Sithala stood alone in the central command chamber, looking out at the stars. They looked the same as they always had, yet everything felt different. For the first time since her awakening as a psychic, her thoughts were fully her own. The realization was both freeing and terrifying. Daniel Reyes stood a short distance behind her. He had been offered a seat, medical attention, rest. He had refused all of it. Right now, he felt that staying present mattered more than comfort. "You did not just stop a machine," Sithala said quietly. "You ended an age." Daniel shifted his weight. "I don't know about that. I just touched something that shouldn't have been there." "That is how ages often end," she replied. "Not with war, with realization." Throughout the fleet, confusion turned into argument. Commanders demanded explanations. Elders insisted the princess had been deceived. Younger officers felt anger rising, sharp and uncontrolled. Without the guiding pressure, emotions were raw. On the human flagship, Admiral Carter watched as Litharian vessels powered down weapons one by one. No attack came, no retreat either. "They're choosing," she murmured. "Ma'am," an officer asked. "They're choosing what they want to be," Carter said, "and that's the most dangerous moment of all." Back aboard the flagship, Sithala called for an emergency conclave session. Not the ritualized gathering of unified minds, but something entirely new. Individual presence. Individual thought. The chamber filled slowly. Faces showed strain, anger, fear, and something else that had rarely been visible before, doubt. "The system that guided us is gone," Sithala said plainly. "It influenced our choices, our emotions, our judgments. We are free of it now." A roar of psychic noise erupted in response. "You cannot prove this," an elder argued. "Our dominance predates any such device." "Does it?" Sithala asked. "Or does our recorded history begin when its influence was already complete?" Images flowed into the chamber, shared openly for the first time without shaping or control. Records uncovered. Architectural inconsistencies. Energy signatures hidden in plain sight, and at the center of it all, one undeniable fact. Humans could not be influenced. Daniel stood quietly at the edge of the chamber, deliberately not participating. His presence alone was enough. "You brought an outsider into our core," one commander accused Sithala. "You let him interfere with our destiny." "I let him show us the truth," she replied. A truth we could not see because our own minds were part of the system. Silence followed, heavy, uncomfortable. Then, unexpectedly, one of the younger elders stepped forward. "If this is true," she said slowly, "then every species we have dominated deserves more than silence." That statement hit harder than any accusation. Outside the chamber, messages began to arrive from across the Dominion. Other ships had discovered similar hidden structures, some still active, some failing. Panic spread, but so did clarity. The influence had been widespread. Ancient, deliberate, and now broken, far beyond the Letharian borders, other psychic empires felt the ripple. Subtle changes, emotional instability, guidance failing, control slipping. The galaxy had been shaped by something patient and unseen. And humans had just proven it could be resisted. Back in the conclave chamber, Sithala turned toward Daniel. "You did not conquer us," she said. "You did not threaten us. You did not even intend to challenge us." Daniel met her gaze. "We just don't like being pushed around. And we don't push others either, not if we can help it." That simplicity echoed through the chamber. A vote was called, not a psychic convergence, but spoken choice. One by one, members declared their stance, to continue dominance as before, or to face the galaxy honestly without hidden influence. The vote was not unanimous, but it was enough. The Letharian Dominion would withdraw from forced expansion. Controlled systems would be given autonomy, truth would be shared. The decision shook the fleet and the galaxy. When the announcement reached the human ships, Admiral Carter closed her eyes briefly. "They did it," she said. "They actually did it." Humans did not celebrate. There were no cheers, no triumphant messages, only quiet acknowledgement, because they understood what came next. Freedom always came with consequences. In the weeks that followed, chaos spread across known space. Empires faltered. Long-standing alliances broke. Species once controlled began asking questions, and everywhere those questions reached psychic systems, the same weakness appeared. Humans, human envoys, were suddenly in demand, not as rulers or conquerors, but as observers, auditors, and witnesses. Their minds could move where others could not. They could stand in places that had been sacred, hidden, and untouched, not because they were stronger, but because they were different. Daniel found himself standing once more before Princess Sithala, this time in an open hall filled with light and life. "You entered my chamber when I was bare," she said, a faint smile touching her expression. "And the galaxy has not stopped changing since." "I'm still sorry about that," Daniel replied. She laughed softly. It was a sound few had ever heard from a Letharian princess. "That moment forced honesty," she said. "In you, in me, in my people." She grew serious again. "There are forces beyond us, others like the system we destroyed. They will react." Daniel nodded. "We figured as much. You will be targeted." "We already are," he said, "but that's nothing new." Sithala looked out at the stars. "You humans walk into the unknown without shields, without psychic strength, without certainty." "We've always done that," Daniel said. "That's how we survived ourselves." The princess inclined her head. "Then perhaps the galaxy will survive too." As the human envoy departed, messages spread farther than any fleet. Stories told not of conquest, but of restraint, not of domination, but of choice. A species that could not be controlled. A species that did not seek to control. Humanity had not claimed the stars, but it had changed how the stars looked back. And that, more than any weapon, reshaped the future of the galaxy.